Hey, Mago, this is Alex. I'm the executive pastor here at the church. Just wanted to provide you an update as we come towards the end of 2020, both for our central and east side campuses. Your generosity and your faithful giving enable us to meet the needs spiritually, physically, and emotionally, both within our church community, but also the city of Portland. It also enables us to retain our staff, to support our ministries, and to be a generous church. Right now, where we stand is at Central, our needs are $377,000, and at Eastside, they're $50,000. If you could give by December 31st, you can do so by going to the link that you see on your screen, or if it's more convenient, to simply text on the number that you see on the screen as well. We hope that you had a safe and great Christmas, and look forward to 2021, possibly just even being able to see each other face to face at some point down the line. And we're praying for you. We love you guys, and have a happy New Year.
Hey, Imago. This is our last Sunday before we get out of 2020 and into 2021. And I have to say, I think everybody is about ready for a reset. 2020 was not exactly what we expected, was it? Most of us saw it at the beginning in January, and we thought, this 2020 is the year of vision, of clarity. And maybe we did see more clearly, but we probably didn't see exactly what we wanted to see. COVID deaths by the end of the year are up over 300,000. We've got racial tension and unrest in our country with the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. We have divisions, we have extremism, we have the election madness. The economy has taken a huge hit. College, all school for that matter, is never going to be the same. Most of us are very, very ready to transition into 2021. The trouble is, 2021 looks like it's going to be more of the same. We're still locked down, and even though we have a vaccine, COVID cases are still on the rise. Businesses are still closing. People are continuing to protest. Cancel culture is still canceling. November elections are not quite behind us yet. And despite all of this, I am convinced, along with King Solomon, that there is nothing new under the sun, that there's nothing that we have to deal with right now or have ever had to deal with or will deal with that we can't find help for right here in this Bible. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to you about the prayer, God speak to us. And we looked at how everything that God has to say about anything can be found in Jesus Christ. And 2021 is no exception. So today, we're going to talk about transitions. We're going to talk about moving from this season into the next season when next season looks like it's going to be the same as the last season, at least for a while. Now, I think that we have a reason to be hopeful as we enter 2021. My friends will tell you it's the Cindy Lou Who in me, but I will tell you that I am convinced that it is the Jesus in here that has me certain that there's reason to hope. Our text for today is going to be Mark 6:30 through 44. Now, that's a pretty familiar text, and it's a well-worn text, but let's go through it anyway. Starting at verse 30, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. Matthew and Luke say that he preached the kingdom and he healed the sick that were among them. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But Jesus answered, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "That would take more than a half year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. So looking at this initially, it doesn't really look like things are very transitional, but it's important to understand the background of this in order to see what I mean when I talk about transitions. So first of all, Jesus had sent the disciples out in pairs to minister in the surrounding cities. And they preached, and they healed, they got a taste of what they would ultimately be doing, and ultimately what they were called to. And while they were gone, John the Baptist was beheaded by King Herod. Now, he's not just family. He's not just Jesus's cousin, but he was the proverbial voice crying in the wilderness that we hear about in the Old Testament. He is the one who would announce the coming of the Messiah. He's the prophet who would come in the spirit of Elijah. And he baptized people, but he understood that he was not, as the Gospel of John says, he was not the light, but he was the one who would point to the light. He said, as a matter of fact, that the one who was coming after him, he was not worthy to tie up the laces of his sandals. So the moment Jesus' public ministry began to take off, John's began to wane. And as a matter of fact, when his disciples would come to him and say, Jesus is getting a lot more publicity and a lot more attention than you are, John's response was, he must increase, I must decrease. So John progressively decreased until ultimately he gets beheaded and he's dead. So with his death, the public ministry of the disciples began to take off. And as a matter of fact, Jesus begins to talk about his own death at the same time. So this is all very transitional, even though it doesn't look that way. It also didn't feel that way to the disciples, because here they come back from this trip of ministering and preaching and doing God's work. They come back expecting to get some rest, and what happens? They get back and they cannot even catch their breath because people are still there. People are around. They try to get away, to go someplace quiet so that they can just exhale. And those people are still there. In fact, it says they went away by themselves, but many of the people who saw them leaving, they rushed on foot. And when they got there, it says Jesus landed and saw this large crowd, and he had compassion on them, and he began to teach them. So the first thing I want you to see about this transitional time that doesn't feel so transitional maybe, is that rest matters, but the work doesn't stop. The work doesn't go anywhere. It says when Jesus saw the crowd, he didn't complain or try to get away again. No, he just got to work. And like him and the disciples, we may not get to catch our breath going into 2021. I mean, it's great to imagine that from December 31st, 2020 to January 1st, 2021, all of a sudden, magically, things are new again. But the truth is new takes time. And it's going to take some time for us to make this transition into 2021 if we're going to make it at all. And new or not, ultimately, we are subject to the needs of our neighbor, not our comfort, not our satisfaction. The poor are not going anywhere. And we don't have the luxury as the people of God to pretend that we don't see the increasing number of tents going up in our neighborhoods and the streets around us. Food banks are understaffed, and yet they're overworked and busier than ever right now. Yeah, we're tired. We're tired of COVID. We're tired of Zoom meetings. We're tired of homeschooling. We're tired of quarantines. We're tired of the four walls around us. We're tired of everybody in our families up in our space every minute of every day. Heck, I live alone and I get tired of myself sometimes. But here's the deal. The world does not stop falling apart around us just because we need a little me time. Which brings me back to Jesus and the way he managed times like these. Jesus saw everything that was at stake. It says that he had compassion on these people. It says because they were like sheep without a shepherd. It didn't say he had compassion because they were sick or because they were poor. It says they were shepherdless. Now, sheep without a shepherd are interesting little creatures because they're already not the brightest things in the world. But the thing about sheep without a shepherd is that they will go on doing the things that they typically do, just that they'll be more susceptible to the dangers around them. Sheep eat, for example, whatever's in front of them. They don't care that it's poison. They don't care that it's a mess. They don't care that it's sticks versus grass. They'll eat it. If it's there, they eat it. And they'll eat it down to the roots. They just don't care. And they have a tendency to look down and not pay attention to what's going on around them when they're eating either. So wolves can get at them pretty easy when they're eating. They also have no idea how to find still water. They don't know how to protect themselves. And a sheep without a shepherd is a sheep that is susceptible because it's not safe. A sheep with a shepherd is one that has a sense of belonging and has their safety in numbers. And so it says that Jesus, in that moment, decided, I need to be their shepherd. He preached the kingdom to them, and he healed their sicknesses. The people around us are not just struggling physically or financially or relationally. The people around us are also struggling spiritually. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, no matter what it is we do for people, what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world but lose his soul? So in addition to the time and the resources that we have in our hands, the gospel needs to be ready in our mouths to be preached and lived out. As we move through this dying world, how we love people points to the one who can truly save their lives. During Advent Conspiracy, we say we spend less and we give more and we love all, but we also worship fully, which means we leave nothing undone. It doesn't matter how much you give or how much you do if there is no love with that, if there is no living out of the gospel and living out who Jesus is in the world. Look, it's not easy to face the start of a new year, especially if that new year promises to be the same as the year before. We all want renewal and restoration, but it's hard to see the possibilities through all the stuff that's going on right now. So how do we move forward with hope? Well, another thing I want you to see in this passage as you make your way into 2021 is this. You see in the scene that it's late, and the disciples ask Jesus to send the people away so that they can get themselves something to eat. And Jesus answers, he says, you give them something to eat. And they say to him, that would take more than a half year's wages. Are we supposed to go and spend that much money on these people to give them something to eat? And Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? And they say, okay, we've got 5 loaves and we've got 2 fish. Jesus directs them to have everybody sit down. And then it says, taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looks up to heaven, he gives thanks, he breaks the loaves, and then he gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. He also divides the 2 fish among them. And everybody ate, and everybody was satisfied. Now, here's what's interesting. In Mark, In Mark, this story is told. It's also told in Matthew and Luke and John. It's told in all the Gospels, but not one of them say how this happened. That's my first question. How did you take 2 fishes and 5 loaves and divide them among all of these people? In all 4 Gospels, not one of them gives you a clue. They're all silent on the subject. But here's what they all do say. They all say that Jesus asked what was there. And then he said, take what's there and give it here. And then it says that somehow in his hands, something happens. Now, as you make your way to 2021, Jesus is saying what he has always said when we have no idea what to expect. Trust me with what you have, and trust me with what you don't have. 5 fishes and 2 loaves is not much in my hands, but it's a feast for thousands in his hand. Think about this. It says 5,000 men were fed, but there were men, women, and children. So you're talking about probably at least 10,000 people who were there. Now, how does this happen? I don't know, but I do know that it begins with trusting him. It begins with giving him what we have, whether it's our material wealth, whether it's who we are as a person, whether it's our worries or our concerns, whether it's what we don't know or what we don't have. It begins with trusting him. Now, we may not have any idea how we're going to make it or if we're going to make it from January 1 to December 31, 2021, but we are not orphans. As the people of God, we are not shepherdless sheep. And because we're not, we can know that whatever it is we have, it's enough. Not just for us, but for all the people who are in our path, all the ones that we're called to care for. And it's not just whatever is or isn't in our hands, but it's whatever is or isn't in us. The disciples are tired. It's been a long day. Their tempers are short. They're overwhelmed. Mark hints later in the chapter that they couldn't understand the miracle of the fishes and loaves because their hearts were hardened. And when Jesus says, you give them something to eat, they're outdone. They have the money. They just think it's too much to spend on these people. But they miss that Jesus didn't say, buy them something to eat. Jesus said, give them something to eat. And usually when Scripture talks about a hardened heart, it's usually a heart that is hardened by unbelief. So maybe they just didn't believe that those 2 fishes and 5 loaves could go anywhere. But nobody says it, but you get the impression that they're over this. They're over Jesus, they're over the day, they're over these people out there, and they just don't have what it takes to keep going in here. But Jesus multiplies the loaves and the fishes, and then somehow he multiplies the strength of those cranky disciples. They started off the day worn out, tired, deteriorated, and then they're able, when Jesus gives it to them, to serve 10,000 plus people at the end of a long day, after returning from a long season of service with no rest. You are 2 fishes and 5 loaves. And if you're anything like me, you don't always feel up to being and doing everything that's required of you. And in your own power, you're not. But in his hands, like the bread and the fish, taken and blessed and broken and given, you are always enough. It may not always seem that way. But this word in Philippians 1:6 says that he who began the good work in you is faithful. He's faithful to complete that work in you. The disciples were trying really hard, like we do sometimes, to lead him with the information that they had. This is how much food we have. This is how much money we have. We can do this. We can't do this. But Jesus says, I don't need you to do that. I would rather have you follow me with your imagination, because he knows what we don't know. He can make what we can't make. He can multiply what we can't multiply. He can stretch what we can't stretch. My mother used to say that you would get to the end of a month and you'd run out of money before you ran out of month, but somehow Jesus would make that dollar stretch, and we ate and we were satisfied. Only with Jesus can we as people become multiplied and become more than we could ever be on our own. 2020 sucked. 2020 was horrible. But I truly believe that, as in all situations, it prepared us for whatever 2021 has for us. This is the time for fishes and loaves. It's a time for feeding and for loving and for meeting every open mouth with an open hand and reverent silence. The Mount is for preaching, and preaching has its place, to be sure, but the time for coming down is now, to come down from the Mount and go out, for teaching and reaching, not for knowing, but for seeking and finding the least and the last and the lost. This is the time for something from nothing, for riches to naught. It's the time where the lofty gives way to the needy, when the mighty cannot sell themselves for a widow's mite, and beggars have the ear of the king. This is the time for God's people to stand up, to stand still and to see God work, to stop moving and shaking and stockpiling and gathering into barns, because God's got us and we can trust him, not just with what we have, but with who we are. 2021. I have a challenge for you this year. It's a simple one. When we looked at our Advent calendar this year, we had a digital Advent calendar, and on every Friday, we had what was called Thank God Friday. Somebody would actually spend some time letting you know why they were grateful for God in this season. I want us to carry that over into 2021. And every Friday, I have it in my calendar already, every Friday, think of at least one thing that you can thank God for in the preceding week. One thing, at least. If you can do that, then that means by the end of 2021, no matter what happens during the year, you will have at least 52 things that you can say God did that was good. You can see 52 ways that he multiplied fishes and loaves in your life, 52 things that made you know that you are not a shepherdless sheep or an orphan. I am ready for whatever's coming in 2021. And you're ready too. We got this because we got him, and he can be trusted. Let's pray. God, thank you for whatever is coming in 2021. Every Friday, I'm going to thank you for at least one thing, hopefully more than one thing. But Father, I just pray that we would become a church that would be grateful for whatever comes, because you are a God of fishes and loaves. You are a God who multiplies us. You are a God who feeds the world with us when we have nothing in our hands. Father, make this a church that believes that. Make this a church whose heart is not hardened, who understands what it looks like to feed the world with fishes and loaves, whether it's emotional or physical or spiritual. God, you've put it in us. Show us how to give it. We thank you for 2020. We thank you for every up and every down. We thank you for being able to endure this year. We thank you for helping us to live through every loss and every problem and every difficulty. And we trust you with 2021. Bless you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Should nothing of our efforts stand, no legacy survive. builder's stride. To you who boast tomorrow's gain, tell me, what is your life? A mist that vanishes at dawn. All glory be to Christ. All glory be to Christ our King. All glory be to Christ. His rule and reign will ever sing. All glory be to Christ. Behold, our God shall live with us and be our stead.